welcome to a new episode of The Brand Called You. I am Marini and I'm with Ashutosh Garg, the founder of The Garden Pharmacy and co founder of The Brand Called You. And today we are talking about hiring senior management in startups. Hello, sir.
Hi, Arini.
Um, I'll start by asking what is the importance of having a senior management in startups, because startups are usually one or two people or maximum five, six people. How important is it to have a senior management?
So, let's look at when a startup starts. If there's a single founder, then they need to have some people who are able to bring in complementarity of skills. If there are multiple co-founders, then the assumption is that those co-founders are not doing exactly the same thing, but doing things which are completely different. Right? Example, the brand called you. You and I are co-founders. You have completely different skills than my skills. Right? Other than, of course, the age difference. But I mean, I don't have any idea on how you are able to technically manage to do so many things with all the interviews that we are doing. Having said that, a startup is a startup for a few months, for a few years. But once it starts to get revenue, you need to start building teams.
Right.
And those teams are where the challenges generally come. Because if a startup founder does not get good quality people, and when I mean by good quality, I don't mean, someone who's a friend of mine or someone who can go out drinking with me or someone who laughs at all my jokes, etc. But it is a group of people who will be able to push back when things are not working, who will be able to tell the founder that this is not the right path, let's go on another path, who will be able to strategize, who will be able to sit together and say, this is where we want to reach in the next 3 months, or next 6 months, or next 12 months, etc. Therefore, if the founder is a great technical person and they have managed to get a really good product in the market, then the people you need are a good marketing person because the product has been taken to market. You need a good finance person, right? And these are skills that will keep getting upgraded. So I am not at all suggesting that, you're 1 year into the business, you've earned your first $1 million of revenue, and that you get 200 or 300 or $400,000 per annum salary people. So your management team has to grow with the business. And at each stage, and I've often said this, people don't like it, but at each stage, the team has to keep changing based on the demands of the business. The group of managers who have taken a company from 0 to 10 may not, and I'm using the word may not necessarily be the right people to take the company from 10 to 100. And from 100 to 1000, you may need a completely different team.
Okay, so when you're hiring your senior management, should you look at a long-term perspective? Like, would you hire with the vision and with the mindset that he's going to stay here for the next 4 or 5 years, or is it like it's just a year or two perspective?
I would not at all look at how many years.
Oh, okay.
I would look at the ability of an individual to manage the needs of my company
Right now.
Right. So if I have an example, let's say finance, today I need a person who can do all my books of account, who can make sure all my statutory filings are in time, who can make sure that all the tax returns are filed on time.
Correct.
I've now grown into a larger company. I now need to raise money. The individual I have may not necessarily be equipped to raise money. Then the company gets even bigger, and I now need a public profile of the finance person because I'm doing an IPO.
Right.
So I may need a completely different individual who will then have to come and handle my IPO.
Right.
So as the needs of my business grow, that is when I have to take a call as an entrepreneur to say who is the individual who will best fit the bill.
Okay.
And what is very important is to make sure that you get the best individual. You cannot compromise by saying, I can't afford to pay this individual, therefore let me compromise and take someone who's lower paid. Or I cannot say that, he's a very, very good friend of mine, and therefore, why should I, hurt my friendship So let me carry on with that same individual, right? Because that will ultimately hurt the business, right?
Now, the next thing is when you start growing, you need to have a board of directors into place. So, how do you go about that?
So initially, a startup would normally have two directors, which is the statutory requirement, which could be two co-founders. If you're a solo entrepreneur, you will end up getting either a spouse or a parent into your company. That's only to meet statutory obligations. But boards of companies are very, very important to give guidance in terms of direction, in terms of governance to the entrepreneur. Therefore, a board must get people who are competent. A board must get people who can guide the entrepreneur and must get people who are secure and have got a lot of experience.
Right.
So that when a company runs into problems, and I don't think there is any company that does not run into a problem, the board is strong enough to be able to steady the ship and to be able to really take it out of the troubled waters and keep guiding the entrepreneur.
Right.
I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs fill boards with family members.
Right.
Right? And the reason they fill it with family members is that now they've got a board who they can say will listen to what I am saying as an entrepreneur.
Right.
That's a disaster. Right? Because you cannot, if you want a board to do exactly what you want as the entrepreneur, then why have a board?
Right.
Right? You could just have someone who can stamp as long as you're meeting your 2-member statutory board, which is a requirement. Why put more people on the board? Because you just end up wasting time, having large board meetings, sending board papers, etc., etc.,
Right.
and you are not willing to take any kind of inputs.
Right.
So therefore, the boards must be completely independent,
Right.
and must have the ability to give you knowledge, good governance, and direction to the entrepreneur.
So how often should the board meet? I know the statutory requirement is just two, but is the board there just to fill the statutory requirement, or is it something that, I mean, if you face problems, that's when you call a board meeting? Okay, I need to meet virtually or physically. That's up to you. But then,
So the statutory requirement is 4 meetings.
yeah, 4 meetings.
So
Yes.
other than those 4 meetings, again, a lot of startup entrepreneurs do a board meeting on paper, right? Because it's too much of a pain for that individual to have a board meeting.
Right.
But I think it's very, very important to make sure that you have your 4 board meetings, you have a proper agenda circulated,
Right.
you follow, and this is all written down,
Correct.
in government policy.
Right.
Last week meetings minutes have to be adopted now. They have to be adapted, adopted in the board meeting, and then the agenda is taken up, etc., etc. The company secretary has to record all the minutes,
Correct.
right, and then circulate it. But then your board must be flexible enough to be able to say that if I need to meet another 2 times because I want to be able to brainstorm with you, most of the board members or some of the board members make themselves available, right? When someone signs on to be a board member, they normally say that we are committing to meet the 4 statutory meetings. But some of them may agree to say that, okay, we are available to be able to brainstorm a little more. And that is when we've got to be able to use them. Another thing, today, of course, there's a mandatory requirement to have women on the board. But I do believe that if a startup entrepreneur is making building a new board, they must get women of their own accord rather than because it's the statutory requirement.
Exactly.
Because on boards, you get a very, very different perspective from women. They're able to think through much, much more differently than the traditional mindset of a lot of men on the board. I have worked with a lot of women board members, and I think they give some unique perspectives which are very valuable to the company.
And I think it's more important to have a diverse board rather than, or at least a diverse group of people that you call up when you are in trouble, so that you get unique answers from each of them. It may be women, it may be people from the other gender, and anything. So moving forward, actually, I have one more question on the board. So, do you pay all your board members? Is it a salaried position?
No. A non-executive board member cannot be given a salary.
Okay.
Again, those
Okay.
are requirements of the law.
Okay.
There are standard norms for compensation of the
Okay.
board members,
Okay.
because at the end of the day, they are giving their time.
Right.
So therefore, their time has to be valued,
Right.
right? Different companies have different ways. There are norms, and some companies will pay you a small sum of 10,000 rupees for a meeting,
Okay.
even though you're taking so much of their time. Some other companies may give you much larger, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 rupees.
Okay. Okay.
But again, these are all very company specific, depending on how big the company is or how
Okay.
the companies are being managed.
So
And
sorry for being so naive here, but I'm sure most of our viewers also have similar questions because somebody who is starting up has never heard of a board, how a board looks like. I
Correct.
mean, they have only seen those long tables.
Yeah.
So when somebody signs up to be a board member, so what does he have to gain other than just, you know, giving advice, guiding the company as a whole?
That's a very good question. From a board member's perspective,
Right.
the individual is joining a board with a lot of experience, primarily with the objective of being able to give back a lot of their learnings
Okay.
to multiple businesses.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So you will find board members who are available, and mind you, today with the very stringent requirements that the government has in place of the amount of knowledge a non-executive board member must have about the company they join, a lot of people are not willing to join boards very easily
Right.
because they must be sure that the entrepreneur is being very transparent with them, because the liability for any problem or any misdemeanor is exactly the same as that of the board member, a non-executive board member, and that of the entrepreneur.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
That's how the law starts. So, for example, in my personal position, I have stepped off of all boards, and I keep getting requests from people to join boards, and I say no, I don't. I'm happy to become an advisory board member, but I don't want to be a fiduciary board member because the liability is too much, and I don't have the time to be able to go into great detail of what the company is doing. So therefore, board members are taking a big risk on themselves if they're joining a board, and therefore it is up to the entrepreneur to make sure that there is complete transparency, right? And if there are challenges, bring it to your board. Those board members, with all their experience, and they've joined you only because they want to give back all their learnings, they expect you to be transparent and to tell them what the challenges are, rather than a sudden notice from some government authority to say there has been non-compliance.
Right. Right.
In fact, just again for all our viewers and listeners, I used to have a policy, and I've told this to many of my friends, that if I was on the board of a company, I used to tell the CEO and the CFO that at every board meeting, please give me a signed statement confirming that you have made all the statutory payments on time, you have submitted all the statutory returns, and you have met every single statutory compliance that was required in the 3 months.
Okay.
Not that that was good enough for me to be able to get away if there was a problem with the authorities, but by signing the statement, the people who are actually running the company, which is the entrepreneur or the CFO, at least sit down and think through every single point that they are signing to.
Correct.
And
Correct.
once they're putting their signature to it, every human being is conscious that if I put my signature to something, I could be held liable.
Right.
So therefore, you've got to be careful.
So some sort of self-compliance that you try to bring in. So that's smart. And thank you so much for being so candid about how the board works. Now, moving on, I would like to get into the senior management part. Now, when you start looking at new startups, the founder is often the CEO.
Correct.
Is that the right way of going about it, or should I think of having a CEO even though I'm the founder?
So generally, again, it's a question of what stage the company is at. If you are bootstrapping a startup, I don't think the individual, the startup entrepreneur, has the money to be able to pay a full-time CEO.
Correct. Correct.
But at some stage,
Hmm.
I do believe that the founder or the founders should step back and let a professional CEO
Right.
take over and run the business. And the founder should really step back and say that we will be involved more in governance and strategic direction.
Right.
But to be able to reach that stage, some companies may do it in a year's time, some companies may do it in 10 years' time.
Right.
It's entirely dependent on when the company seems to be attractive enough
Hmm.
for a professional manager to say, I want to be your CEO.
Okay. 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 Now the next thing is, who is a COO, Chief Operating Officer? And you have mentioned many times that the Chief Operating Officer is the key to the entire business. Now, what is the importance of Chief Operating Officer, and how is it different from the CEO?
Okay. So again, this becomes a stage at which the company has now reached.
Correct.
If you are a 100 crore company or if you are a 300 crore company,
Hmm.
then the CEO's role starts to change and grow into more of strategic direction and managing a large group of leaders.
Right.
And yet there is one individual who has to run the business.
Hmm.
That business now becomes the chief operating officer.
Right.
So this is the classical CXO kind of structure.
Correct.
There is the CEO, there is a CFO, a chief HR manager, a chief operating officer,
Hmm.
and the chief operating officer is the person who runs the whole business.
Right.
But then there are the staff functions like finance, human resources, marketing maybe, right? And systems,
Hmm.
which are the four functions that will continue to report to the CEO.
Right.
Till the CEO becomes so big that he says, okay, now the CEO, you run the whole company, and I will now get into the role that the promoter was involved in.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
And classical examples, of course, you will see are your Googles and, where the founders have stepped back completely.
Right. Right.
And they've gone, those are companies that make multiple $billion of profit every year.
Exactly. So it's more run like a government rather than a business, I guess.
Yeah.
So at what point do I say that, okay, I need not only a CEO, I need a COO, CFO, and all those CXOs. Now companies have chief pleasure officer, this officer.
When you can afford them.
Oh, when I can afford them.
Otherwise, if you can't afford them,
Yeah.
then and you get them, how will you pay them?
Correct.
Predominantly a function of affordability.
Okay.
I mean, if you are making a profit of 1 crore,
Right.
I don't think you can hire 5 people
Yeah.
who you want to pay 1 crore each.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But what you can probably do is say, okay, for 50 lakh rupees, and the reason you bring in someone, if you're making a profit of 1 crore, and you say, I'm going to bring in someone with a salary of 50 lakhs, is because you're expecting that individual to take your profit up from 1 crore to maybe 10 crores.
Right.
Right? That's the only reason you bring in an outsider, because that individual should be able to bring in so much additional knowledge and give so much more energy to the business that the business grows significantly.
Right.
Otherwise, you've got the wrong person.
Correct.
If that individual is able to take the business of 1 crore to 10 crores, then you have he and your CEO and he can sit down and you can sit down and say, do I need to bring in a CFO now? Right? So that's another cost to you, but again, more efficiencies come.
Right.
So getting more people is a direct function of how much you can afford.
Okay. So thank you so much. I think that has been really insightful. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for the Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.